They say every superstar has a secret. But what if that secret isn't just hidden? It's alive. What if it stands next to you in every photo, whispers in your ear during every performance, and takes a piece of your soul with every hit song? This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is what happens when you shake hands with something that was never human. The production assistant didn't know any of this when he took the job. He was just grateful for the opportunity. Working on a music video for the Weeknd, Abel Tesfaye, was the kind of gig that could launch a career. Big budget, creative freedom, and a chance to be part of something millions would watch. His name was Marcus Chen, 26 years old, and he'd been grinding in the LA production scene for 3 years. Mostly commercial work, car ads, makeup tutorials, the occasional music video for artists nobody had heard of. He'd worked on low-budget indie films that never made it past film festivals, and spent countless hours doing corporate training videos for tech companies that paid well but crushed his soul a little more each day. But this was different. This was real. This was the Weeknd. Marcus had been a fan since the Trilogy days, back when Abel was still mysterious, still underground, still dangerous. He'd watched the transformation, from the anonymous voice on SoundCloud to global superstar, from House of Balloons to stadium tours. And now, somehow, Marcus was going to be part of that world, even if just for 4 nights. The shoot was scheduled over 4 consecutive nights in a massive abandoned warehouse in downtown LA, near the Arts District. The building had been a textile factory in the 1940s, then a rave venue in the 90s, and now it sat empty except for the occasional film production or art installation. The ceilings were 30 feet high, exposed steel beams crisscrossing overhead, and the concrete floors still bore the stains of decades of industry and decay. The concept for the video was dark, vintage noir aesthetics mixed with supernatural horror, reminiscent of old German expressionist films but with a modern, almost apocalyptic edge. Abel wanted something that would make people uncomfortable, something that would linger in their minds long after the video ended. The director, a French visionary named Philippe Moreau, was known for his twisted, unsettling visuals, videos that looked more like nightmares than music videos. Marcus arrived at 6 p.m. on the first night, 2 hours before call time. He wanted to familiarize himself with the space, set up his workstation in the media tent, and make sure all the digital infrastructure was ready. His job was to organize and log all the B-roll footage, manage the digital files, coordinate with the cinematographer on camera angles, and essentially make sure that every frame captured was properly archived and accessible. The warehouse was already buzzing with activity. Lighting techs were hanging fixtures from the rafters, creating pools of red and blue light that transformed the industrial space into something alien and otherworldly. The production designer had constructed several sets, a hallway that seemed to stretch into infinity using forced perspective, a circular stage surrounded by mirrors, and a small room draped entirely in black velvet. Marcus set up his station in a corner of the warehouse that had been converted into a media tent, essentially a cluster of folding tables covered in monitors, hard drives, and laptops, all protected by a makeshift canopy of black fabric. He plugged in his equipment, tested the monitors, and pulled up the shot list for the night. At 8:47 p.m., the energy in the warehouse shifted. People stopped talking mid-sentence. Movement slowed. And then Abel Tesfaye walked in. He was dressed head to toe in black, leather jacket with silver zippers, black jeans that looked painted on, and Chelsea boots that made no sound as he walked across the concrete floor. His hair was pulled back, and he wore sunglasses despite the fact that it was night and they were indoors. But it wasn't just his appearance that commanded attention. It was his presence. The air around him seemed heavier, denser, like reality bent slightly in his proximity. Abel moved through the space like a ghost, barely acknowledging the dozens of people working around him. He nodded once to Philippe, whispered something to his manager, and then walked directly to the first set. No small talk, no pleasantries, just focus. Marcus watched from behind his monitors, fascinated. He'd worked with plenty of artists before, but there was something different about Abel. something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. "All right, let's go," Philippe called out. "First setup. Abel, center mark. Let's get your levels." The crew scrambled into position. The camera operator, a woman named Sophia with 20 years of experience, adjusted her Arri Alexa. The gaffer made final tweaks to the lighting. The fog machine began pumping out thick white smoke that caught the red and blue lights, turning the air into something you could almost touch. Abel took his position in the center of the circular stage, surrounded by mirrors angled at strange, disorienting degrees. The mirrors reflected him from multiple angles, creating a kaleidoscope effect, dozens of Abels staring back at the camera, each one slightly different. "Action," Philippe called. Abel began to move. Not dancing exactly, but something more primal. His body swayed, slow and deliberate, like he was being controlled by something other than his own will. His head tilted at unnatural angles. His hands moved through the air as if conducting an invisible orchestra. The performance was mesmerizing, hypnotic. Marcus found himself unable to look away, even though he should have been monitoring the digital feeds. There was something about the way Abel moved, the way the shadows played across his face, the way the mirrors seemed to show not just reflections but possibilities, different versions of the same man, each one darker than the last. Cut. Beautiful. Let's go again. They ran the shot 6 more times, each take slightly different. Marcus dutifully logged each one, marking timestamps, noting any technical issues, organizing the files into the proper folders. It was tedious work, but he was good at it. Detail-oriented, precise. At 11:30 p.m., during a break, Marcus decided to review the first batch of footage. He wanted to make sure everything looked good, that there were no glitches or corrupted files. He put on his headphones, isolated himself from the noise of the set, and began scrubbing through the raw files. Take 1 looked perfect. The lighting was moody and atmospheric, the fog effects worked beautifully, and Abel's performance was haunting. Marcus watched it once, then twice, checking for any technical issues. Nothing. Clean footage. But then, on the 3rd viewing, he noticed something. In the background of the shot, just over Abel's left shoulder and slightly out of focus, there was a figure. At first, Marcus thought it was a crew member who had accidentally wandered into frame. It happened sometimes, someone checking a light, adjusting a fog machine, forgetting that the camera was rolling. But as he looked closer, he realized that wasn't right. The figure was tall, very tall, taller than any of the crew members. And it was standing completely still while everyone else around it moved. The figure was dressed in black, not production black, but something darker, something that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Marcus paused the footage and zoomed in. The figure's shape was wrong. Too tall, too thin, with limbs that seemed slightly too long. The head was tilted at an angle that would be uncomfortable for a human to maintain. And the face, if it could be called a face, was obscured by shadow, a darkness so complete that it looked like a void. Marcus checked the shot list and the crew positions. No one was supposed to be in that area during the take. He pulled up the 2nd take, scrubbing to the same moment in Abel's performance. The figure was there again. Same position. Same unnatural stillness. His heart rate began to increase. He pulled up the 3rd take, then the 4th, then the 5th. In every single take, the figure was present. Always in the same relative position behind Abel. Always motionless. Always watching. The rational part of Marcus's brain tried to explain it away. Maybe it was a shadow cast by one of the light fixtures. Maybe it was a trick of the fog and the mirrors, creating an illusion of depth where there was none. Maybe it was some kind of visual artifact from the camera sensor. But the more he looked, the less those explanations made sense. The figure had dimension. It had presence. And in certain frames, when the lighting shifted just right, Marcus could see details that made his skin crawl. The figure had no face. Where there should have been eyes, a nose, a mouth, there was nothing. Just a smooth, featureless surface that seemed to ripple like water. The hands, if they could be called hands, had too many fingers. Long, spindly digits that hung down past where they should end, occasionally twitching with a movement that was barely perceptible but deeply wrong. And then Marcus noticed something else. Something that made him stop breathing for a moment. In every frame where the figure was visible, there was a thin line connecting it to Abel. Not a physical line, nothing you could touch, but something visible in the footage, a subtle distortion in the air, like heat shimmer or the wake behind a boat. It stretched from the figure's chest to the center of Abel's back, pulsing faintly with each movement Abel made. It was as if they were connected, tethered. Marcus pulled off his headphones, suddenly very aware of how alone he was in the media tent. The sounds of the set filtered back in, people talking, equipment being moved, music playing from someone's phone. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. He looked over at the set. They were preparing for the next shot. Abel was sitting in a director's chair about 50 feet away, scrolling through his phone, completely relaxed. He looked normal, human, real. Marcus saved the file he'd been reviewing and stood up. His legs felt weak, unsteady. He knew he should probably keep this to himself, not bother anyone with what was probably just a visual glitch or his own exhausted imagination. But something compelled him forward. Something that felt like gravity or fate or stupidity. He wasn't sure which. He walked across the warehouse floor, weaving between light stands and equipment cases, until he was standing a few feet from Abel's chair. Up close, Abel looked even more otherworldly. His skin was flawless, almost artificial in its perfection. His sunglasses were so dark that Marcus couldn't see his eyes at all, just his own reflection staring back at him. "Hey, Abel." Marcus's voice came out smaller than he intended. "Can I ask you something?" Abel looked up from his phone, his expression unreadable behind the dark lenses. "What's up?" His voice was smooth, melodic, but there was an undercurrent of something else. Something that made Marcus want to step back. Marcus hesitated, suddenly regretting his decision to approach. "There's something in the footage. In the background. I don't know if it's a lighting issue or maybe a camera glitch, but show me." Abel stood up in one fluid motion, sliding his phone into his jacket pocket. He gestured toward the media tent. "Let's take a look." They walked back together, and Marcus was acutely aware of the attention it drew. A few crew members glanced their way, curious about what had warranted Abel's personal interest. Marcus sat down at his workstation, pulled up the file, and pointed to the screen. "There, behind you, in every take." Abel leaned in close, his shoulder nearly touching Marcus's as he studied the monitor. For a long moment, maybe 10 seconds, maybe 30, he said nothing. He just watched the footage, his expression completely neutral, his breathing so quiet that Marcus couldn't hear it. Then, slowly, Abel smiled. Not a friendly smile. Not a reassuring smile. Something else entirely. "You see him?" Marcus blinked, his mouth suddenly dry. "See who?" Abel straightened up, crossing his arms over his chest. He glanced around the media tent, confirming they were alone, then looked back at the screen. Not everyone can. Most people don't notice. Their brains just edit him out. Pattern recognition filter. Survival instinct. Whatever you want to call it. But you, he pointed at Marcus with one long finger. "You see him clearly, don't you?" Marcus felt his chest tighten. Who is he?" Abel's smile faded, replaced by something more serious, more real. "He's my partner. Has been since the beginning. Since before the beginning, actually." "Your partner?" Marcus heard the words coming out of his mouth, but they didn't feel like his words. Like someone else was speaking through him. "Yeah." Abel's voice was calm, almost casual, like he was discussing the weather or what he had for breakfast. Every hit song, every sold-out show, every award, every magazine cover, he's part of it. All of it. I didn't ask for him. Didn't go looking for him. He found me. Marcus stared at the frozen image on the screen, at the dark figure standing behind Abel, connected to him by that invisible tether. What is he? Abel was quiet for a moment, as if considering how much to reveal. Then he sat down in the chair next to Marcus, leaning back, completely relaxed. You ever heard the stories? About artists who make deals? Musicians who sell their souls at the crossroads? Actors who sacrifice everything for fame? Writers who channel something dark to create their best work? Marcus nodded slowly. Most of those stories are bullshit. Made up. Mythology to explain success that people don't understand. But some of them, Abel paused, choosing his words carefully. Some of them are true. Not in the way people think, but true enough. You made a deal. It wasn't a question, but Abel answered anyway. I made a choice. When I was nobody, broke, living in basements, making music that nobody heard, he came to me. Appeared in my apartment one night. Just standing there in the corner of my bedroom, watching me sleep. Scared the shit out of me at first. Thought I was losing my mind. What did he want? Abel's smile returned, but there was no joy in it. To help. That's what he said. He told me he could give me everything I wanted. Success. Fame. Money. Power. The ability to create music that would touch millions. All I had to do was let him in. Let him be part of me. And in return, Abel said softly, he takes pieces. Little pieces. Memories. Mostly. Feelings. Moments. Things I don't need anymore. Every time I release a song, every time I perform, every time I achieve something new, he takes something from me. A childhood birthday party. The first time I kissed a girl. The day my grandmother died. He collects them. Stores them somewhere I can't access anymore. Marcus felt sick. That's insane. You're telling me you're losing your memories? Your life? Not losing. Trading. There's a difference. Abel leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. You think talent alone gets you here? You think hard work is enough? This industry eats people alive. Chews them up and spits them out without a second thought. You either find a way to survive, or you disappear. I chose survival. I chose to matter. But at what cost? Abel's expression darkened, and for the first time, Marcus saw something behind the cool facade. Something like regret. Or maybe fear. I don't remember my father's voice anymore. I know he existed. I've seen pictures. But when I try to remember what he sounded like, there's just nothing. Static. And my first dog, the one I had when I was 7, I know I loved him. I know he died when I was 10 and I cried for days. But I can't remember his name. Can't remember what he looked like. It's like trying to grab smoke. Marcus couldn't find words. What could you possibly say to that? But the music, Abel continued, his voice gaining strength, the music is real. The connection I have with millions of people, that's real. When someone tells me my song saved their life, helped them through a breakup, gave them hope when they had none, that's real. And it wouldn't exist without him. Without what he gives me. What happens when you run out? Marcus asked, his voice barely audible. When there's nothing left to give. The question hung in the air between them. Abel stood up, sliding his hands into his pockets, and for a moment he looked almost human. Vulnerable. Small. Then he takes the rest, Abel said quietly. The pieces I'm trying to hold on to. The core of who I am. And when that's gone, I'll just be. He gestured vaguely. An empty shell. A vessel. Still making music, still performing, but with nothing inside. How long do you have? Abel looked at the screen, at the figure frozen in the frame. I don't know. Could be years. Could be months. He never tells me. That's part of the deal. The uncertainty keeps me creating, keeps me hungry, keeps me afraid. Fear is fuel. Marcus felt a weight settle in his chest, heavy and cold. Why are you telling me this? Why not just, I don't know, lie? Tell me it's a camera glitch and move on. Abel smiled again, and this time there was something almost kind in it. Something sad. Because you see him now. And once you see him, he sees you too. That's how it works. That's how he finds people. He shows himself to those who are looking, who are hungry enough to notice what others miss. Marcus's blood ran cold. What does that mean? Abel walked toward the tent's exit, pausing at the edge of the fabric barrier. He looked back over his shoulder, and even through the dark glasses, Marcus could feel his gaze. It means you have a choice to make. You can walk away, finish this job, collect your check, go back to your normal life. Pretend you never saw anything. Your brain will help you with that. Human minds are good at forgetting things that don't fit. Or you can stay. Keep looking. Keep seeing. And if he decides you're worth it, if he thinks you have something to offer, he'll come to you. Make his offer. And you'll have to decide if what you want is worth what you'll have to give. I don't want that, Marcus said quickly. Too quickly. Abel nodded slowly. Yeah. That's what I said too. But I was lying to myself. And I think you might be too. He left, disappearing back into the chaos of the set. Marcus sat alone in the media tent, staring at the frozen image on his screen. The figure in the background seemed closer now, though he knew that was impossible. The footage was paused. Nothing could move. But he could swear the head had tilted. Just slightly. Like it was looking directly at the camera now. Looking at him. Marcus shut down his monitors and took a break, stepping outside the warehouse into the cool Los Angeles night. The arts district at midnight was quiet but not silent. Distant traffic sounds, the occasional siren, the hum of the city that never truly sleeps. He lit a cigarette even though he'd quit 6 months ago, his hands shaking slightly as he brought it to his lips. What the hell was he doing? What had he just heard? Was Abel Tesfaye seriously trying to tell him he'd made a deal with some kind of supernatural entity? That his success was built on trading away his own memories and experiences? It was insane. Impossible. The kind of thing you'd see in a bad horror movie, not real life. But the footage didn't lie. The figure was there. In every frame. Connected to Abel by that strange, shimmering tether. And when Marcus really thought about it, when he pushed past his rational skepticism, he had to admit that something about Abel had always seemed off. Not in a bad way, but in an otherworldly way. Like he was playing a character, even when he wasn't performing. Marcus finished his cigarette and went back inside. The shoot continued through the night. More setups, more takes, more of Abel moving through the warehouse like he was dancing with shadows. And in every frame Marcus reviewed, the figure was there. Sometimes closer, sometimes more distant, but always present. Always watching. By the time the sun started to rise and Philippe called wrap on the first night, Marcus had reviewed over 6 hours of footage. And in every single second of it, the figure appeared. Its position relative to Abel never changed more than a few feet. The tether never broke. Marcus drove home in a daze, barely paying attention to the road. When he got to his apartment in Koreatown, a cramped studio with thin walls and a radiator that clanged all night, he didn't even bother undressing. He just fell onto his bed and stared at the ceiling. He should sleep. He needed sleep. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw it. The figure. That smooth, featureless face. Those 2 long fingers. That impossible stillness. Eventually, exhaustion won, and he slipped into unconsciousness. But his dreams were dark and strange. He dreamed of standing in an empty room with mirrors on all sides, each reflection showing a different version of himself. And behind each reflection, the figure stood, its hand outstretched, offering something he couldn't quite see. When Marcus woke up 8 hours later, his phone was buzzing with messages from the production coordinator. Call time for night 2 was 6 p.m. He had 4 hours to shower, eat, and convince himself that he was just tired, that he'd imagined the significance of what he'd seen. But deep down, he knew the truth. Something had changed last night. Some door had been opened that couldn't be closed. And whatever was on the other side was patient. It could wait. The second night of shooting followed a similar pattern. Marcus arrived early, set up his station, reviewed the shot list. Abel appeared at exactly 8:47 p.m., dressed in black, moving like a shadow made flesh. The crew worked like a well-oiled machine, capturing frame after frame of unsettling, beautiful imagery. And in every frame, the figure was there. But tonight, Marcus noticed something new. Other crew members, not all of them, but a few, would occasionally glance at the spot where the figure stood. Quick, nervous glances, as if they sensed something without fully seeing it. The gaffer adjusted lights in that area with a strange reluctance, moving quickly, never lingering. Sophia, the camera operator, twice repositioned her rig to avoid pointing directly at the figure, though she never acknowledged it or explained why. They knew. On some level, they all knew. But they'd made the choice not to see, not to acknowledge, not to ask questions. That was how you survived in this industry. You kept your head down, did your job, and ignored the shadows in the corners. During a break around midnight, Marcus found himself wandering the warehouse, ostensibly checking on the backup drives and file transfers, but really just trying to clear his head. He ended up near the black velvet room, one of the sets they hadn't used yet. The room was small, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet, with walls completely covered in black velvet that seemed to swallow all light. In the center was a single chair, and above it, a spotlight that wasn't currently on. It was meant for a close-up shot of Abel, some kind of intimate, confessional moment. Marcus stepped inside, just for a moment, wanting to experience the space, to understand what it would look like on camera. The moment he crossed the threshold, the temperature dropped. Not gradually, instantly. His breath became visible in the air. The sounds of the warehouse disappeared, as if the velvet walls didn't just absorb light but sound as well. And he felt it. That presence. Not behind him this time, but all around him. In the walls, in the floor, in the air itself. Watching, waiting, hungry. Marcus backed out of the room quickly, his heart pounding. As he emerged back into the warehouse, the normal temperature and sounds rushed back in, and he realized he was shaking. Intense, right. The voice came from his left. Marcus turned to see Abel standing a few feet away, holding a bottle of water, his expression neutral. That room is special. Philippe designed it specifically for the final shot. Said he wanted to create a space that felt like stepping into another dimension. It's definitely something, Marcus managed. Abel took a sip of water, then looked at the black velvet room with what might have been respect or might have been fear. It was hard to tell. Some places are thin. Walls between worlds wearing down. That room is one of them. Makes it easier for him to manifest. To show his true form, if he wanted to. Has he? Marcus asked before he could stop himself. Shown his true form. Abel was quiet for a long moment. Then, softly, once, early on, when I first made the deal, he wanted me to understand what I was agreeing to, what I was inviting in. He shuddered slightly, the first crack in his cool exterior Marcus had seen. I don't recommend it. Some things, once you've seen them, you can't unsee. They change you. Fundamentally. But you went through with it anyway. I was desperate. Broke. Talent that nobody wanted to hear. I would have agreed to anything. And he knew that. They always know that. They can smell desperation like blood in the water. Before Marcus could respond, Philippe called for Abel.